there's people that have come into the office today that just started 2 years ago.
I'm not even saying 2 years ago. I'm saying specifically 2024. Once you break through, you can make money in a ton of different ways. But starting specifically in 2024, I actually feel like it's very difficult.
So Dame just discovered memes, everyone.
Yes. No, but I wanted to talk about this picture in particular, for a number of different reasons and get your guys' opinions on it, right? Obviously, there are 5 gentlemen here in a larger boat, and each one of these individuals is like taking off wood from the larger boat to make an individual boat. So at first, I just wanted to see kind of like how you guys, or what kind of messaging you guys take away from this image, because I think this plays out in real life all of the time in the music industry, especially. You have a team, and then, you think you have a team, and then, there are individuals that are acting very selfishly, or only thinking they're on a team, but they're really only thinking about themselves and, how they're going to move going forward. And ultimately, the boat can't survive, the team can't survive. And in this picture, I think all these cats are going to drown because these waves are pretty large. They're making very small boats from the original larger boats. If they all stuck together, they probably could have survived, or they probably will survive. But, I'm sure this brings up memories for all of us. We've all been a part of several teams and, that are no longer together. And I think this picture clearly depicts kind of what possibly could have happened, or part of maybe what actually played out in real life.
It goes back to the people wanting 100% of zero. You got that little ass boat. It's yours 100%. It's all yours. It's not as spacious. It's not as safe. It's not as sturdy. You see that all the time with teams. Individual artists perceive that the success of the team has to do 100% with them, which is insane. I don't know. Again, it's one of those things where I can't imagine someone believing in the logic of that. But then they go off on their own. They're like, I can do this myself. And then they sink.
Erinn,
a million times.
Let me ask you a specific question. So how can you prevent this from happening in the first place? Right. And obviously in this picture, people are already sawing off wood from the larger boat to create their smaller boat. Like, how are there things that you've learned from your experiences that could even help stop this from happening? Stop that first person from sawing the piece off the larger boat.
Yeah, I think learning your leadership style and expectations. Unfortunately, I think you have to go through this even in a small way to know how to not experience this on a grandiose scale, because people had told me forever, Erinn, you can't put everybody on. You got to think about yourself. You got to think about how everybody is getting in alignment with you when you lead a team. And as a team player, as a starting point guard, you're still not thinking like a coach or like an owner. So I was taking a point guard mentality to leading a team when I really needed to be a commissioner or an owner with a coach's heart. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I still couldn't be a player. So I think one is knowing your leadership style, and then 2 is having a very, very clear-cut direction, which is why we talk about, and we've hit on this so many times, artists don't need teams until they know exactly what they want. I see this less happening to artists from their teams and more happening to the team that has built up the artist, but I think it still functions the same. If your expectation is that we're all going to move in this direction and you don't have clarity and accountability within that, then you're leaving people up to their own devices. And 9 times out of 10, everybody's going to choose themselves. And especially if you're a leader who's an aggregator of people, who I feel like all 3 of us are like that. Our desires, like, let's bring everybody along. Let's teach, let's equip, let's help everybody. But the methodology could be different, even if it's not selfish or intentionally selfish. And I could even give this podcast as an example. We all three function very, very differently. Dame is like leads us, so to speak. So he has to come back. You have to come back and be like, hey guys, this is where we're going. And it's not because we don't want to go there with you. It's that Payne has a thought about how to get there and what he wants to do. I'm thinking along these lines. Do you know what I'm saying? And you're like, there's more for us. But if you're thinking your more is over here and I'm thinking the more is over there, we're never going to get anywhere. We're just going to all be moving on three different places. And I think that's with the three of us who care about this and want to move forward in a good way. So imagine going into a situation where somebody's like, well, I'm just here to get a paycheck. And another person's like, I'm just here to build my reputation. Another person's like, I'm here to make connections in the industry so I can get my next job. And another person is like, I really want to be an artist, but I'll work on this artist team. So hopefully I can, so it's just, you have to, again, figure out your leadership style, then determine where you're going. And then I think the thing to prevent it is setting the expectation and then having discourse about it consistently, like put the vision in front of people, have the conversations, but there's got to be an accountability factor. And so to me, with accountability, there are consequences for not being on the same team. And consequence doesn't necessarily, it could just be, hey, we're not doing what we said we were going to do. We got to get this together. It could just be calling it back in, but it could be like, hey, we no longer need you on the team, or we don't need you in this capacity, or, you know what I'm saying? This is the last thing I'll say. Like, I'm in the process of hiring again for the first time in over a year. And I was talking to my business partners about it, and they were like, oh, we should pay this person this and this, this and this. I said, no, we're not paying them more than this. They're going to have 90 days, and these are the expectations that they have to meet, and they have to also add on money-making activities. I think the problem that I had as a business owner was I wanted to help everybody, so I was paying everybody to do tasks that weren't money-making, and it was sinking my ship because it was putting more. Now I have to bring in more money to pay more people, and all they're doing is simple tasks, So for me, one of my baseline standards is, yes, you could be doing this clerical work, whatever, but everybody who's added to our team now has to be doing a money-making activity, and we're evaluating that every 60 days. And so I think that's something you just got to figure out what the needs are and what your style is, and then set expectations, and then have a way of keeping everybody accountable within those expectations.
Yeah. Payne, from your perspective, like, how could you get people in this picture to pick up a paddle to paddle in the same direction as opposed to a saw that's sawing off wood and ultimately sinking the boat? What's your perspective? Like, how can you get people to pick up a paddle instead of a saw?
Honestly, this is why I don't really work with teams. And I'm not saying it's not that I don't work with teams. It's that I don't work with unvetted teams. And what I used to do, like what Erinn just described, I would join a team, and then I would see that there were all these needs that I had the ability to perform and fill, or I had the ability and desire and capacity to learn how to fill. So I would do that. And it ended up with me being, what I joined to be, the music producer, the DJ, but then the graphic designer, then the SEO guy, then the web guy, then the guy that made the EPKs, and I was doing management. And then it went on to me handling the budgeting and everything. So now I'm the treasurer of the group. And it just kept adding on. And what you realize is not that people appreciate you for doing all those roles. They start, resenting you because they look at you as having too much control. And then they resent you if you have all those positions and things aren't moving quickly enough. They start putting more blame on you because they know you're doing 80% of the work. They'll never say, hey, you know what, you're doing 80% of the work. Let's talk about you getting 80% of the compensation, or let's figure out something fair and equitable. It's always like, oh, if you can't handle it, then you shouldn't even be here. It's like, bitch, you couldn't handle sending an email. I had to do that. What are you talking about? So I learned that the hard way. And so now it's hard to find like-minded people, but when I walk into collaborative team situations, I'm working with people that are already established, that I'm aware are already established. And the beautiful thing about the internet is you can really see, it's like a secret language. You know what I mean? Like when you get to a certain point in the business, you can just talk to people and know what, like, there's nothing really tangible about it. You just kind of have that conversation and like, okay, they're talking like they've experienced this. They know what they're doing. I'll work with this person at least in a limited capacity now and see where it goes. But like, yeah, or just be willing to be in a group, play my role. And if someone's doing 50% of the work, I'm not going to fight you on it. You deserve more. If you're doing half the work and it's a 8-person team, then you should get more than your 1/8 of a cut. If you know, I'm willing to see what that is and not be a hypocrite about it. And I think that's the problem. A lot of people aren't like that.
But that's still a difficult conversation to have. And I've talked about that a lot on this podcast. Like if you ask 4 people individually, like what percentage they contribute to the end goal, and, you know, 4 people are each going to be like, oh, 50% at least, you know, and then 4 times 50 is 200. Obviously, there's not 200% of the pie. So I think it's great. Ultimately, it comes down to communication, but, you know, people are going to have different perspectives on like value. And, you know, once somebody feels like they're getting the short end of the stick, that's when they start sawing off the first piece and building, you know, their little boat because they feel like, you know, they're not getting what they deserve. But what Erinn...
But the problem is that they're a moron, right? Well, and so you can't really reason with them.
Well, sometimes they're a moron. I think that a lot of times they're a moron. And then sometimes there's just a disagreement on like value. Like even in my contract negotiation right now with 2 Laws, like I think things are going to go well, and ultimately we'll you know, I'll be here for a while or a long time. But like, you know, if the CEO felt my value was X, I thought it was Y, I can't necessarily take that personal. That's his opinion on what I bring to. Sometimes there's just a different opinion on what value is. But ultimately it's the communication. You have to communicate what Erinn talked about. Like everybody should be clear on what we're trying to get out of this. And we can think that we can get different things. We might have different motives, but all of those motives have to be accomplished by going in the same direction, right? If what you're trying to accomplish is going west, and what I'm trying to accomplish is going east, and what the other person's trying to accomplish is going north, then we should not be in the same boat to begin with. Like everything has to be accomplished going in the same direction, even if we have different things that we're trying to accomplish at the end of the day. So that's ultimately that you got to have that conversation. Hey, should we even be in the same boat right now? Because it looks like you got to go that way. I got to go this way. So let's have a very genuine conversation and just feel like, okay, you know, maybe we just have to help each other when we can, but we shouldn't be on like an official team. We shouldn't be on the same boat.
And I think like even having fluidity within that, like now with my co-founders, because Brandon, who everybody knows about, is my co-founder for Build Your Own Dreams and other companies that I've had. But we just we have a new co-founder for the company that we have in Austin. And we started the company, things started going really good, really quickly. And so we were like, we need to get more stuff together because we had our organizational chart from the beginning, which was new for us because normally, you know, you're like flying the plane and then you're like, oh shit, who's the pilot? And this one we were like, here's where everybody falls in line. But the moment we started making money, we were like, Brandon is doing most of the money-making activity. We need to allocate towards his department the most money. If he decides to hire somebody, he can hire a person and take the money from his department, or he can keep that money. It's up to him. But so that's what we started doing that. And then one of our co-founders was like, or the other co-founder, super dope human, but she just was like, I didn't realize how much time it was going to take me to be here. I'm very much okay taking a back seat. I want to be a part of this, the IP, and here's where I can serve. But I have all these things going on. And like, I don't want you all to feel the discomfort of this. But in 6 months, when I transition to this, and this, I think I will be back up to being able to fulfill the original role. I just didn't think it was going to move this fast. You know what I'm saying? And so even that, so we have in our bylaws now, every 6 months, we're reevaluating the structure. So we have like a percentage that the owners get, very small percentage. Everything else is a departmental thing. But that was something that we had to learn. And then even I just joined a team for another company. I'm getting a little bit of equity just because I'm fresh to the company, but it's like I'm just working off of the opportunity. And when I was talking through with the team, I'm like, we could do it like this, and this. And they were like, we didn't even think about the fact that we could reevaluate every 3 to 6 months, or, you know, it's just like you can make your own rules. But it's like when you get in a boat, I love water. What does that mean? We could all say we love water. If we say we love water, if my mom says that, she means she loves drinking water. Payne could say it, it could mean he likes to swim. You know, I like to swim. I love being on boats. I love driving boats. I love drinking water. I love water, period. But that could mean something different to everybody. If you get in a boat and everybody says they love water, but we don't have any life jackets and the sea starts to swell and somebody's like, we gotta go, we gotta get out of here. I'm like, wait, what's the issue? This is natural. This is what happens when you're on the water. So I think that kind of clarity and the consistent communication that Dame said, but I think you gotta be fluid enough to not let your ego say, well, we started this way, so we've got to end this way. And I think, but you also have to have enough trust within the team that people aren't always trying to renegotiate your value. Because I've had that issue too. It's like my capacity kept growing. I kept doing more things like Payne said, just because I wanted to add, oh, let me fix this, let me try this, let me try this. And then the entitlement says, well, you've been doing all of this before. As the pot grows, yours doesn't have to because you seem to be fine doing it at it. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, no, we have to say, like, be willing to give and take. You know, and I think getting in the boat ultimately with the right people. My rule is nobody can bring a saw on the boat. Like, we have one saw, it's the boat saw. You know what I'm saying? Like, because we may need to break it down if we get shipwrecked, but no saw, you cannot bring your own saw on the boat. And I think sometimes people are like, oh, bring your own tools. We're going to build this thing. No, I'm checking your tool bag. Only certain things are allowed in here. You know, that's like a safety check. People are like, oh, you can't bring this, and this on an airplane. Everybody abides by that for safety. And it's like sometimes when we're starting new things, we're like, well, this person is bringing this and that. No, I think strong leadership says that you get to determine what's best for your team. And as a leader, as somebody who's evolving in my leadership style and skill set, I'm realizing that I have to be more upfront with what I will not allow in my team. And that's me being a better leader than it is being a worse leader, because I'm fearful that people won't feel heard. You go feel heard on your own boat. Right now on this boat, you get these benefits. And if you want more, then you have to exit the boat, you know?
Yeah. The last thing I will say on this is if you're on a team right now and you feel like you need to jump off the boat, I really hope that you're mature enough to really evaluate like your decisions, right? And you can kind of figure out which piece of this is ego, like it just kind of going back to the picture, like, do you really understand how like deep these waters are, how rough these waters are? Like, do you really know what it would be like, you know, the difference between, you know, trying to go at this with a team and, you know, just jumping off and doing it on your own. Because I think a lot of times, you know, people jump off prematurely and don't really know what they're getting into. And it's just really just a lack of education. And again, maybe your ego, you know, kind of taking control. So again, that's what goes back to tapping into these sessions, you know, just really learning the business so that you can make sound decisions, you know, at any point, because you might need to jump off a boat. Like every boat's not for you. You might get on several boats and you feel like, oh, this isn't, you know, this wasn't what I thought I signed up for. And sometimes it's healthier to jump off the boat or, you know, have your own boat, you know, your own little kayak or whatever. So yeah, to me, it
Or
just,
communicate that, hey, next time we dock, I'm leaving. You
yeah,
know, it doesn't always have to be jump off the boat. Sometimes, like you said, sometimes you need to. But I think sometimes it's okay to be like, hey, I'm committed here. And I think that type of commitment is missing from a lot of teams too. Like these people are cutting the boat. It's evident they're going to bail soon, which is crazy. You could just say, this is no longer serving me, or it's not, I can see where the end is coming. I'm willing to stay and finish this thing, but then I want to make an exit. And I think enough people don't exit properly, which is why a lot of ships sink. Like if I need you to anchor us, or if I need you to paddle the oar in this direction, if you jump off, none of us get to the dock safely, and then everything explodes. And I think this is the last thing I'll say. I think that that's a lot of the times what ruins artist teams. Artists will just jump ship. And it's like, damn. So the manager and the support system and, you know, all the things that are going on and are in place don't get to be properly resolved because the artist jumps ship. And I'm not saying the artist is the most important person in that. It's just the person that is participating in a factor of the boat that requires you to be there for everybody to get to shore safely. And because you know you can jump ship and everybody will be shipwrecked, that mentality can sometimes, you know, corrupt everything. And so I think even again as a leader, even when I've wanted to jump ship, I'm like, I have to steer this boat safely to shore, even though it's going down, even though I'm miserable, even though everybody else is benefiting here. I've decided that I'm going to take on that responsibility. And I think that's what everybody has to see it through. And unless it's extremely detrimental to you, I believe that more people need to be team players and say, hey, I'm going to see my commitment through. And if you are looking at the ship like I have to make it to the dock, you're going to be less likely to cut the ship up because you're like, well, I got to stay on this thing too and get to shore safely. And I think that changes the mentality of the team.
yeah. Yeah, we can. I know we got one more topic queued up, and we don't have that much more time. But you know, being on a team, managing a team is extremely difficult. You know, especially in music. So you know, hopefully this conversation was helpful, or at least gets people to think about some things, whether they're currently on a team or thinking about forming a team. But it's not a decision to take lightly. Yeah.
I think being on teams also informs you how to form your team well. So don't shy away. Don't always be like, you got to be number one. Go join some teams, y'all. Volunteer for some teams, work for some teams. Like you got to be a part of the team, not just as the minion in corporate America and say, I hate it here. I'm going to go do my own thing. And then that's your only experience. I hate it here. Now I'm going to lead. You got to be on a team that you enjoy. You got to be on some that you're leading, helping to lead. You know, the more team dynamics you experience, the better leader you'll be and the better you'll be at being a team player, in my opinion. So my topic is I'm just posing a question, so it doesn't have to go long. I don't have an answer. And I would like to get back into going into open-ended things. One, so that our audience can participate in the conversation. But two, personally for me, so that I'm expanding my mind and thought process and not just always sitting in the place of, here's my opinion, or here's how you should do it in my opinion. Like, my question is it possible for an artist right now to start and genuinely make it in the music industry? Like if they were to make their first song last week and they're planning on releasing it, you know, in July or August, can you go from zero? Like I'm saying, you're not previously a part of a rap group. You're not previously, no connections, no relationships. Can you start today and actually make a full-time living in this music industry, let's say in 3 to 4 years? Like, is that possible with the way the landscape of the digital era, the way that labels, indies, all this, is that possible? And the reason that I pose this question is because I think that the time and space that we're at in the industry, we have innumerable resources for independent artists. There's so many different ways that you can be resourced, but at the same time, there's hundreds of millions more people trying to make money in music, and maybe not even a full-time living, but trying to get their name out there, trying to make it in music. And then now, because of the education and access to information. There are a ton of executives and a ton of people with different opinions. There are different label systems. There's all these different things. So if you don't know much about music and you just walk in the door and you're like, I want to make a living here, is that possible now? Is that something that you would say if somebody's like, I really want to be a full-time artist for a living, you know, if they're graduating from high school or graduating from college, is this something that you hold as a belief that it's possible to build from the ground up in these days?
What would make anyone say no? I mean, obviously, since you're posing this question, there's some doubt from your perspective of like if it's possible. I'm in this now. Like I wouldn't even be. I would just shut the Music Entrepreneur Club down and be like, all right, it's a wrap. Like there's no hope for any artist listening to this. So why even waste my time trying to educate or share my experience? So obviously my answer is going to be yes, but I'm curious to know what you've seen that casts doubt and on whether or not it's possible today.
I mean, I just think there's just so much noise. I'm not saying definitively I don't believe it, but even with this is really cool because we just had this conversation. Even with the MEC, I see it more so as helping people who are already here and already showing signs, or an upward trend in their trajectory, or maybe they are full-time and it's trying to help them do more. Maybe they're part-time or whatever. I don't necessarily see it as this is a place for people who have no experience or understanding whatsoever to come and say, okay, now I'm going to take their knowledge and I'm going to build a career off of it. I just wonder because, you know, I've said this several times, maybe not expressly on the podcast, but I don't feel like I work in the music industry anymore. I work adjacent to it and I work around it. But, you know, like, I'm not in a traditional format of building. People have asked, so many artists are like, yo, you know, manage me. And I was out of management. I've been out of management like 2.5, 3 years, really. My foot's been out the door, but fully out of it for almost a year now. 7 months, not a year. Even though I'm out of management, all that, I haven't been interested in working with a brand new artist for over 5 years, just because I feel like the landscape of the industry is so difficult. I couldn't tell you like right now, if you were starting, I couldn't tell you a formula to take. I could say here's some standard practices, here's some possibilities, but I think because there are so many possibilities and there are so many, I think being an influencer or a podcaster right now, to me, would be easier than being a music artist and making a full-time living personally. Like, I just see that there's so many barriers, and I'm not saying it's impossible. I do think that it's possible, but I think the likelihood of succeeding in music, if you're just getting started right now, is lower than ever, in my opinion, because there's so much noise you have to cut through, because there's so few ways for you. It requires so much to make money off of music. So you have to spend an extreme amount of time developing your sound and your brand and being consistent and investing in it and surrounding yourself. You know, it's like you have to really build a fully vetted business with a great product, and then invest heavily monetarily. Whereas I think that with other options in entertainment, I think you have to have a handful of things, but not all of those things to win, because people don't necessarily need more music, right? So it's like, what are you going to bring that's completely different that people are interested in? And then how can you maintain the consistency? How can you be around the right people? And again, if you have connections, if you have an understanding of the industry, and when I say connections, I don't want people being like, yeah, because gatekeepers, I'm not saying that. But if you've already been in the industry and now you're refreshing, or maybe you're a songwriter and you're transitioning to being an artist, like with, what is the guy's name? Tommy, who signed Brent Faiyaz, who's blowing up right now, $1 Million Baby, and then he's got Devil Is a Lie. With him, he was a songwriter, but he's also been releasing music for a really long time, so he's blowing right now. And people are like, he came out of nowhere. And I'm like, this man released 38 songs over the last 2 years. Like, he's been very, you know what I'm saying, super consistent. But I just don't know personally, because if somebody were to say, I'll give you $1 million if you can grow an artist from zero to whatever in the next 3 years, I would be like, I'll take $500,000 to grow me as a podcaster in 2 years or a year. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I just feel like that's not the best bet. And I can't see it. Even when you're signing to a label, I don't see it per se. And I think, again, if you're established or you're growing, don't feel discouraged. I think that people who are building something right now need to keep building, because the music industry makes sense in that manner. But I don't know if you're like, I want to start making music today. I personally would be like, really?
But I don't understand the difference between like telling somebody that has a little bit of traction to keep going, as opposed to like, so really you're saying that the person that's starting now can't get a little bit of traction, right? Because you're telling the people with a little bit of traction to keep going. So ultimately we just need the person that is just starting today to get a little bit of traction. So is that possible? For sure. Then they can get into that group, and then they can be on the same wave that you're telling to keep going, right?
I think a little bit of traction is variable or like subjective. So me saying a little bit, I don't have it quantified specifically, but in my head, it's indicators, it's resources, it's relationships, it's money, right? If somebody now starts and they get a little bit of traction, my thing is, can you keep that going? That's my question. And so it's not about can they get a pop of a little bit of traction. It's can you get a trend of consistent little bit of traction. And I don't know if that's possible, right? It's possible. I just don't know how probable it is. And the low amount of probability is a deterrent for me personally.
Well, if you just look at stats, right? Like, if there are, let's just say when we started with Funk Volume, there were 100 people trying to make it. So we were one label out of 100. So that's 1%. And let's just say today there's 1,000 people trying to make it, and we're one out of 1,000. So just in terms of if we're not looking on like how I'm doing it, if we're not looking at like my skill set relative to these other 1,000, like the chance, if you're taking every variable off the table, you're just looking at stats, it's 1 in 100 versus 1 in 1,000. But I feel like if you're pursuing music the right way, right? So even if it's 1 in 1,000, like in terms of people pursuing music the right way that are serious, committed, consistent, want to learn the business, you're not competing with 1,000 today. You're still competing with the 100, in my opinion, that are really serious about this. So, I mean, and here in my position at Two Lives, like I'm watching artists and the artist team come through the office daily. So I'm seeing it in real time that it is a very real possibility of getting traction. Is it difficult? Are you dealing with different issues today than you were 10 years ago? For sure. But I see it. I see people doing well. But
At the office, are you seeing zero though? Like, because typically if they're coming to the office, they have some sort of traction, right?
But they had to start from somewhere, and it wasn't that long ago. What I'm saying wasn't that. There's people that have come into the office today that just started 2 years ago. That just started.
So I'm not even saying 2 years ago. I'm saying specifically 2024. I feel like the industry changed over. I felt like it was starting to change 2022. 2023, there were so many clear indicators, which is why I was like, I don't want to specifically be tied to an artist to make my money, because I felt like it's trending down and more difficult to make money. Once you break through, you can make money in a ton of different ways. But I feel like starting specifically in 2024, I actually feel like it's very difficult.
No, I mean, it's always been very difficult. But again, what you're saying assumes that like people stop like growing, essentially, right? There's always going to be a new group of young people that connect and engage in different ways that, and stories that need to be told for that new crop of people. There's going to be people that stop making music. And unless you're telling me that like music consumption, like either just stagnate, it just stagnates. There's no more ears or time to listen to music. Like from what I've seen, even though Spotify users, it's their growth rate is going to slow down. It has slowed down, but there's still more people listening to stream. There's still a huge part of the world that doesn't have access to streaming. There's still room for growth in this industry. And yeah, cutting through the noise is extremely difficult, but that's the challenge today versus, maybe other challenges that we had, 15, 20 years ago.
Well, do we think that statistically speaking, fewer new artists are making a living in 2024 than they were in 2000?
No, actually, I was supposed to get this information from Matthew Tilley over at Beat Bread because I had him on office hours, and he was supposed to give me info because there's more people making a living today as independent artists than ever before. Right. And I've always thought that to be the case. And he said it on my podcast. He said it on office hours. And I wanted like the actual data. That just reminded me I should follow up with him to like, where did you get this data? Because I want to look at it because that's always been my assumption. But I've never gotten it, validated.
I don't doubt that, but it's kind of like the same stat that you gave. It's like if you had 100,000 people trying to be an independent artist 15 years ago, and now you have 2 million, by the nature of that, you're going to have more people able to do it. And again, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying I feel like it's a lower likelihood, but I'm also asking in curiosity because I want to see who is doing it, how are you doing it, and what are you looking at? Because I feel like I'm at a point, I'm in my 30s, and so yes, I'm fresh and I'm paying attention to trends, but there's still stuff that I'm not super familiar with. Like I just downloaded Snapchat again because I'm trying to, there's so many creators making a ton of money on Snapchat right now. So I'm like really interested to see how they've kept their platform going for so long. And I know that that's something, and I know, there's the TikTok artists, but like I'm really interested in seeing like what is Gen Z consuming, what is alpha, how are their consumption rates going to go, what does it look like to be a Gen Alpha artist and like to make money. So I'm not trying to be the doomsday, like I'm not trying to be the old head like nobody can make money. I'm just like how and who, and if you were to start today, I wouldn't push you to do it because I couldn't even give you any real advice, to be honest, about starting from zero and making it full-time in music as a music artist in the next, like if you were to say, I'm graduating from high school, instead of high school, I'm going to spend 4 years on this, which is why I used to tell artists, if you're serious about this, spend 4 years like it's college. Don't worry about nothing. Don't worry about it first year, second year, third year, you should be seeing indicators. Fourth year, you should have your plan, but like treat this like college. I don't know if in 2028, 2029, I'm like, yeah, I could see, and it's just because I don't know what are the trends, where people are going to be making their money. Like concerts are harder, whereas you used to say touring is where it's at. Merch is way harder now for different reasons. It's easier, but it's way harder to convince people to buy your artist merch versus buying some streetwear drip from, this Japanese person, so I'm looking at the way that I have encouraged and built artists to make money. And if you're new, I don't know where I would start with you. And so it's just me posing the question, is it possible for you to go from zero to real money in 4 years? Let's say 0 to 100K in 4 years starting today. That's just my question. I'm unsure about that.
Well, and my advice would be don't turn it into a binary, because you graduate high school, suddenly you're in the real world. Depending on your situation, you may need a job. Depending on your situation, there may be pressure to go to school. My thing is, do all that. I remember I tweeted about this the other day when I was making beats and DJing part-time and I was in school full-time and I had 3 other part-time jobs on top of that. I was busy, but I feel like I'm way busier now just doing music full time. So I don't know if part of it was that, I'm like 20, so it felt different. I don't think so. I think it's just my life became more structured, and I'm focused more on, intentionally working on specific projects and then like holding myself to a way higher standard. So it's more frustrating. It feels harder. But one thing people just overlook is, like I can't go to school and make, I don't believe that narrative. If you're a college age student, especially if you're going to a large school, do both, because there are so many resources and so many networking opportunities, so many performance opportunities, so many professional developmental, creative development opportunities in college being a musician. And I see artists consistently squander that. They'll be at their campus. There's a music, there are studios, like on this campus, there's a entire department that just has a budget. It's a student org, I guess, and they bring artists in. And get in with them and start opening. Because there are college kids on this campus that have never performed in their lives. And their first performance, they're getting paid $500 from the university, and they're performing for 1,000 people. You don't get those types of opportunities anywhere else with that direct of access trajectory.
Yeah. From my standpoint, like nothing has changed in terms of like what you're trying to do, right? And I know that community building has now become a buzzword, and like major labels have fucked up these terms, these super fans and things like. But really, it that's what it comes down to. We just have different tools to do it. I feel like Funk Volume would have been extremely more successful if we had the tools of today in 2009 and 2010. But ultimately we were doing the same thing, except I was using Excel spreadsheets and stuff to organize things. Whereas now you have Web3 or different tools and technology to make things a lot easier, right? Like we were literally like writing down email addresses at shows and like having clipboards and things like that. You probably don't need to do that today. You probably could put a QR code up in the front, boom, but it still goes back to the same thing. It's all about community. It's all about building community, engaging with those fans, energizing your hardcore fans, maybe getting them to support you. Like we had, like I've told the story many times before, we had different super fans that led each Facebook group that we had. So we had, Funk Volume Chicago, Funk Volume New York, we had like 50 different Facebook groups. But today it would be so much more easier to like organize and to get messages out and things like that. So it's difficult. It's always been difficult. I don't know if it's any more difficult today than it was back then. I mean, there's some things that make it easier, some things that make it harder. So I definitely think it's possible, just to answer your question.
I want to see a case study or do a case study. If you're new to the game and you're starting, let me know what y'all are doing. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I just don't know, and that's what this is coming from. So I want to be clear about that. I just don't know what a new artist would do. So I would love if anybody give me your thoughts, your ideas. Tell me what you're doing, what you're building. Even if you didn't start this year, if you're like what Dame said, you started 2 years ago or 3 years ago, or maybe you restarted recently. I would love to hear what you're working on and how you're finding success, what you're being consistent about, how you're being accountable. I don't want people to be like, yeah, it's so hard, it's impossible. That's why I just make music for fun, because I'll never make it in this music industry. I'm not looking for y'all. Shout out to y'all. I think y'all can do art for the sake of art, but I'm talking about the entrepreneurs who believe it in their heart, their mind, their soul. They're working towards it. Again, I'm down for you. I just don't know. And because I don't know, I've opted out of that place in the industry where I don't want to build an artist from the beginning. And then even the artist teams I'm working on, I have a newer artist that I'm consulting with, but they're signed to a major label and they were a previous artist signed to another label, and then they changed their name, they changed their approach. So they're not even new. Just this artist formation is new. So I'm not tapped in. And so I actually for educational purposes would love to learn. I'm open, but please, if you have any insight or thoughts, and maybe this is a line through where we have this type of discussion where we're bringing it up maybe monthly and there's different things we're discovering, or somebody pipes in and says, hey, I did this. I'd love to bring y'all on for 5 minutes, or maybe I interview you on Instagram Live on the MEC page. Super open, but please, if you're seeing success and you're a newer artist, DM us, answer on YouTube, whatever. I would love to be encouraged by y'all's growth and what you're trying in this new era.
So yes, but you need to see, because obviously somebody starting now is not going to have like immediate success. So, and you're not talking about artists that started 2 or 3 years ago. So what would you like to see? Like, what small wins would you like to see in an artist that maybe has started in the past year that you would like? Yeah, I guess you're just looking for small wins from an artist that has started in the past year.
Yeah, I mean, even if you started in 2022 and you're seeing indicators, I would love to hear those. My thing would be fan growth and retention. Like, how are you determining that you're growing your fan base, and how are you determining that you're retaining those fans? Aside from just Spotify, what are you doing to connect with your community in real life, or to put yourself in front of people, even if you don't have a community yet? How are you getting in front of people, whether it be performing or just engaging with people directly? So yeah, I would be looking for fan growth, fan retention, in-person engagement, and an upward trend in streams is cool, but maybe it's like, it could be an upward trend in people watching you on YouTube. Maybe you're talking about your process as an artist, or you're making your songs on artists, or Twitch, or on YouTube or Twitch, or Discord. So any type of things where you're just engaging with people on the internet and in real life, but where you can quantify growth. And I think the music is cool, but I'm talking about really from an entrepreneurial standpoint. What are the things that you're mapping out personally to say, like, I could see that I'm growing in this area? And it doesn't have to be super, I do want it to be astute. And if you're a new artist and you're just like, I don't know, I'm just trying things, that's cool. What are you trying? What have you seen that works? Even if you're just like, I tried this TikTok and it worked, I downloaded this app and this worked. I just want to see what's working and what's keeping you encouraged, aside from, I like the way this music sounds. Something has to keep you encouraged to think that you're moving in a good direction. So I want to know what those things are.
Maybe we'll have to get somebody, a younger person. I'm trying to think if there's somebody here off top. But we'll have to.
Yeah, that would help. That would help all of us, I think, seeing that.
It's almost like, why do we do this podcast if we don't, and I know you already kind of addressed that question, Erinn, but it's like, I almost feel like we have to, like, tell people why we even like have this podcast, or why we feel like our voices matter. Like, I feel like I'm still tapped in. I feel like I don't manage any music artists anymore, but I feel like I'm still tapped in to what's happening. I'm tapped into, the different services and things like that. I'm talking with artists and managers all the time. So hopefully I'm not that old head just yet. But maybe I am. I don't know. I'm gonna be putting out music pretty soon, though. We're about to be working on a compilation album with Tula. So, we'll see how it goes.
I'm excited to see that. I feel like that'll be a cool case study today.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, No Labels Necessary. I'd like to have them on, because they're doing research on artists, and they're catching the artists right on the rise.
On the rise.
Music videos. But on the rise could mean, I feel like if you're getting 50 to 100,000 monthly listeners, well, you know what? I shouldn't make assumptions. I feel like if you're getting 50 to 100,000 monthly listeners on one platform, you are probably resourceful enough to parlay that into a full-time income, but not everyone is. So I know. I right as I'm thinking that, I'm seeing Erinn making that same face in my mind's eye. So it's just because the ones I know, like, a Ted Park, for example, I know people like him who are at that 100,000 monthly listener mark, and they know what they're doing. They're planning their tours. They have a content strategy. You know, there's a lot of thought put into this. This is just something that they live and breathe. And, you know, not everyone is like that. So if you are like that, or you want to see if you're like that, no need to pay any money. Go to twolost.com and get 3 free months of premium music distribution. Use the code @odds. So there's no obligation. You don't have to spend money to get your music on all the major platforms. See how it performs. You know, learn the system. Learn about pre-saves. Learn about all of the rules governing a rollout in 2024. But do so for 3 months without any sort of financial obligation. Best case scenario, you learn something, you get your music out there, and you don't have to pay for it. So that's what this is. And we will catch you same time, same place next week right here on @odds. Peace.
Peace.